Well, now, how can a guy, as you'll see, who looks and talks and acts so young be retired? Well, I guess he's just actually not retired. That's the secret. He taught at McMaster University for almost 30 years, founding director of a wonderful, wonderful center called the Center for Peace Studies, for which I have huge respect. And he's directed peace-building projects in several war zones, including Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. He's a member, not last but not least of these formal qualifications, if you will. He's a member of Scholars for 9/11 Truth and Justice, which is a very important organization. If you meet anyone who says, well, there's nothing really solid about the questioning the official 9/11 story, you can send a person, if they're seriously interested, to Scholars for Peace and Justice, and they will find very well written, very believable information there, which is very hard to turn aside. But just before the break, or later this afternoon, I had a little chat with Graham, and I asked him a question that I often ask people who are 9/11 truthers. It's a great phrase that's come into the language. Even the phrase just truthers has come into the language. What an important development that is, truthers, because it highlights that there's a wide understanding that truth is so important, maybe the most important thing we need in the world today. Without truth, you cannot have justice, and without justice, you cannot have peace. So there it is. And so I ask truthers, what caused you to twig about the 9/11 being an inside job, and when? And so Graham said it was hard for him to tell. He had certain questions about the events, but they weren't consolidated or gelled that much. He knew that morally it would be possible for leaders to do such horrible, evil things. He was under no illusion about that, but he didn't have evidence that these particular leaders had done these evil things. And what he did was he threw himself into anti-war work, which is a wonderful thing, trying to stop the war in Iraq. And then he doesn't remember exactly the date, but another wonderful 9/11 truther named Ralph Schoenman, who has also blown the whistle on the infamous 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which was also an inside job, if you want to look into that. And Ralph Schoenman challenged Graham. And he said to Graham, "You haven't read enough." And Graham said he was right. I hadn't read enough about 9/11, and he started, and then he became very serious. As he says, he went from being suspicious and questioning to saying to himself, this is real, and decided to throw himself into it. And now we're going to reap the benefits of Graham McQueen throwing himself into it. Graham.
It will take me a few seconds to get all the gear set up. So as they say, talk amongst yourselves. Okay, it seems to be working. Can you hear me? Okay. I'd like to begin with some thank yous. Thank you to the poet who began this evening. Thank you to Testament and Paradigm. That was wonderful as well. Thank you to Barry for a wonderful introduction and very warm. We have similar backgrounds, although he didn't mention it, both being ministers' sons from Nova Scotia. And I'm sure I'm missing many people, but thanks to Paul MacArthur for making sure this event happened. It's an important event. I hope that you will get some things out of this evening. And thank you for welcoming me to your community. Tony and I are going to each speak for quite a while, about an hour. We're going to give a lot of substance, facts, observations, research. We might put you to sleep, but you won't be able to say we didn't say anything. I'm used to, over many years, giving various talks against war as a longtime member of the peace movement and a person who's done peace research in Canada. But most of the talks I give on 9/11 aren't like that. They're not impassioned. They're quite dispassionate, if you like scientific, point-by-point, kind of dry things. And that's just a warning, but I'm not apologizing for it, because frankly, we need to educate ourselves. It's not enough to run on emotion on this one, because if that's all we got, we can be manipulated, and we have been. And we need to be willing to sit down, do our homework, do our reading, do our thinking, talk to other people, and try to figure out what the heck happened on 9/11 and what the implications are for where we should go and what we should do in the future. Now, tonight I'm going to be focusing on the so-called collapse, the coming down of the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center, especially focusing on the North Tower. Sometimes people say to me, oh, for heaven's sake, we've seen those towers come down. We all know it was an inside job. Get on with something else. But you know, we don't all know it was an inside job. There's an enormous need for public education still. And that's why we have to keep talking about this again and again. My aims tonight are quite modest. I don't know the specific names of perpetrators, though I have my suspicions, and I won't talk about that. I want to begin by just explaining to you why a reasonable, ordinary human being might have serious doubts about the official explanation of why those towers came down. And that's, if you like, the critical part of the talk, looking at the official hypothesis and criticizing it. And then I want to go on to the second part, which is, well, if that hypothesis is wrong, which it is, could it be that those towers were blown up? Could it be that controlled demolition brought those towers down? And I'm going to suggest that there is some solid evidence that that's what happened. And of course, if that's true, the implications are huge, because Al-Qaeda, my friends, couldn't have wired those buildings. So that's what we're doing here. That's what I'll be doing tonight. I want to begin with a quick review of the events of the morning insofar as the towers are concerned. The Twin Towers were built in the 60s, finished between 70 and 72, and there they are. The North Tower is the one on the left with the transmission antenna, and it was completed first. It was, when it was completed, the tallest building in the world. These buildings were about 1/4 mile high, enormous, strongly built buildings. And it's the North Tower, the one on the left with the antenna, that I'll mainly be following and talking about tonight, though some of my remarks will belong to both of them. So there they stood until September 11th in the morning. And at about 8:47 a.m. on that day, a large plane crashed into the North Tower at about 450 miles an hour. About 15 minutes later, a large plane, traveling roughly the same speed, crashed into the South Tower. That is the tower beside the North Tower. And this is a view from a man taking the next few photos from his apartment. This is a view of the towers burning. And the only thing I want to draw your attention to here is the fact that although they were both hit high up by large planes, they were hit